Hi, Miss Counts. I'm going to go over my speech regarding Austin traffic issues. Starting with the introduction, I feel like that was one of the areas that I could have done better in, but overall, it tied together all the main points that I wanted to bring across. I feel like I gained attention in an interesting way. It was a little bit more on the original side. So I gave myself an A in that section. As far as the relevance to the audience, I know that I was going for talking to Austin community members. Um, Whether I reference that or not, I'm not for sure. I can't remember at this point, but so I felt like it was important to the audience that I was speaking to, so I gave myself an A in that. As far as credibility, I established that I was credible because I used myself as an example, using a personal example of how Austin traffic has affected me. My thesis statement flowed well. It wasn't very creative or anything like that. It was just kind of pretty straightforward. And then I've also previewed into the speech, but I feel like that was just another smooth transition. I didn't use any sort of creative ways to talk about that. So overall, I gave myself a 13.5 for the introduction. As far as the body goes, I struggled a little bit more with the body. My main points were clear. They were complete and coherent, and they supported my thesis, so I gave myself a B in there. They weren't, I didn't feel like I linked as well as I could have. As far as my arguments, I really came to an ultimate conclusion with the people that I was talking to, so I gave myself an A in there. The supporting material that I used, I was actually able to, I understand this topic pretty well. Being from Austin, I felt like this was an issue that was a little bit closer to home, so I gave myself an A in the supporting material used section. As far as the effective oral citations, I felt like I actually gave it a little bit more variety, unlike I have in some of my past speeches, so I gave myself an A in that section. As far as the organization, that was somewhere that Abby had mentioned that I kind of struggled in. And I would agree with her. I felt like there were points where I was jumping around a little more than I really should have been, so I gave myself a C in that section. My transitions, I felt like they were very effective in the way that I used them, just being able to connect one point to the other. So I gave myself an A in that section. And I used pretty good effective style. I used language that isn't like everyday speech necessarily, so I gave myself an A in that. Overall, gave myself a score of 25 on the body. For the conclusion, I thought I really wrapped that up pretty well. I tied everything together, so I gave myself an A on all three sections, talking about the audience being prepared, the thesis and the main points, and then the closing. And I felt like I used some creative ideas in that and just really wrapped everything up pretty well. As far as the delivery, I gave, excuse me, and in the conclusion, I gave myself 14 points for that. As far as the delivery, I felt like I used the conversational tone again that I used in my last speech, and I was able to maintain a lot of eye contact. I really tried to keep away from using my cards too much. Used a lot of body language, and I felt like I was pretty confident with this speech, so I gave myself 24 points there. As far as the overall impression of the speech, I feel like I adapted this to the audience. I gave them several references as far as like being a part of the community, possibly going to Austin at some point or another, or different things like that. So I gave myself a B in the adapted to audience section. And as far as the topic challenge, I really feel like this was something that the audience could relate to. So I gave myself an A there, which was a score of 12.5 total. So for my overall score, it was between an 89 to that low A 90 range. So that's pretty much it. Thank you.